Hello everybody and welcome to this month's Contract Administration Practice Group. So Douglas and Jim, over to you as I get the slides ready for everyone to start the presentation.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and welcome everyone to the final 2014 webinar. We thought that we've had a lot of comments over the years about how to format these presentations, and so we're trying something a little different this time where we'll have a multi-part conversation. But before we get started, Doug, you want to say anything?
Just wanted to welcome everyone and hope everyone's able to get something out of this presentation. It is the first of a four-part session that we'll be doing.
That's right. And so what our plan is to sort of set up from the very beginning of construction administration the environment. But first, Matthew, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. You know, what we hope here is that after we go through these series that you'll have a chance to sort of take a look at the common mistakes that occur, what best practices might be employed to avoid those mistakes, the idea of delineating what common points may be in failures, in our mistakes, and potentially how to overcome those. And the way that we hope to do that is to use case studies as examples and review those as we go through the webinar. So one thing that I would like to pose to you, because we have this opportunity to stay on this subject of typical mistakes, I would bet that the screen I'm looking at says there are 37 out there right this minute, and I bet that there are 37 times 100 stories that you might be able to share from your perspective of mistakes that have occurred and how you worked your way out of those. So if you do have them, if you're willing to share them, they'll be completely anonymous. And please send those in to Matthew, Doug, or myself. And when we go through today's webinar, if you would sort of take a look at our idea of how to present this, if you have a scenario you'd like for us to put out there for conversation in one of these webinars, then we'd certainly be glad to do that. And if you could put it sort of in the format that we're using, that would be really helpful. But as we go through, take a look and see what you think, and if you have something that you're willing to share, then please do that. So Matthew, let's take a look at the environment. The next slide. You know, it's complex. We've got the agreement between the architect and the owner. Once we work out a relationship, we're off building our relationships with consultants, sub-consultants. The owner may have come to the table with those as well. And as we move through the design of the project and specifying and pulling our details together, we start to form relationships with manufacturers' representatives and the manufacturer who bring products to the project. There are more to come here in the slide, and I apologize, it takes some time when the slide does this, but when I use this slide, you know. So there are, and if we have to go forward, Matthew, that's okay. We eventually, there you go, we eventually make the connection with the contractor, and now in today's world, that contractor comes with another whole web of relationships between subcontractors and sub-subcontractors, relationships with fabricators and material suppliers that are also feeding information to us. So it is at best, extremely complex, complicated web of connections. Doug, anything you want to add to the environment that we operate in?
The only thing is that this diagram here kind of anticipates that this is a traditional design bid build scenario. As we know, there's other delivery methods out there, but you still end up with pretty much the same players, so the relationships might be a little bit different, but you still have this jumble mess, these relationships, these large number of parties that have to come together to complete the project.
You know, one of the things that might be interesting to do in the future is to use other delivery methods atop this diagram to see what I believe is some of the reason that they are becoming more and more popular, in that they remove a lot of the complexity of this environment. And as Doug said, we typically focus here on design, bid, build, but it might be interesting in the future to take a look at how this diagram would change and maybe become much less complicated. And so the next slide, Doug and I always focus our comments on teamwork and team activities. Partnering is a word that we use frequently, and sometimes it means specifically a different kind of delivery method. But what we're talking about here is creating a team spirit where everyone is in this process to work together, that they are focused on solving problems and not creating problems. And we've shared a lot of information over the years about how to create teams and to make a commitment to each other to work together for a common good and harmony, and not adversely with intentions of something less than a successful project for the owner. And that when this team approach happens, you know, this is only when everyone agrees that this is going to be their attitude, that prejudices are set aside, and that, you know, this group is focused and focused in the same direction. There may be chances that we take. We talk sometimes about being courageous enough to admit mistakes and to step up and say that you've missed something, and you'll see as we move through that's one of those chances that perhaps the team, through a partnering agreement or through a partnering position, would agree to take on. Doug, any team activity comments?
No, let's keep going.
Okay. So what are the benefits of working as a team? Well, certainly increased productivity. Project costs are well managed typically. You have an opportunity perhaps for earlier project completion. Certainly it's a morale booster. You know, I assume all of us have had jobs where we looked forward to speaking with the constructor team or the supplier team or to our owner. When the phone rang, it wasn't a dreaded reaction, but something that you look forward to. And in working as a team, that certainly the opportunity for that is improved. And we believe that it leads to fewer claims and delays. So, you know, it establishes relationships where we understand one another. It gives you an opportunity to be goofy and silly on the job site, perhaps, when you have friendships there that go further than just the project itself. It certainly promotes the transfer of information between the participants to a higher level, where you're maybe notifying one another of upcoming issues rather than just calling with a problem at that time. And because of that, the decision-making process is enhanced, I believe, we believe, and it certainly improves the reaction to solving problems. So it's certainly a benefit in many ways, and there are others for sure. Dougie, I'll pause and see if you want to throw any in there.
One of the big benefits I see is that when you're working together as a team and there's not that confrontational adversarial relationships going on, it provides a better experience for all parties, especially the owner. And you want to make sure you have that with the owner, because that's your best marketing for the next job that he's going to have available for you to go after. The other plus that I see is something that was told to me a while back is once you have those relationships and they become friendships, then when an issue comes up, it's easier to sit down across the table from one another and talk to resolve it. What was told to me is that friends typically don't sue friends. So build that friendship relationship. It creates a more comfortable environment when issues do come up. Issues can be resolved amicably and not adversarially.
Thank you, Doug. So those are the benefits. Now, how do we promote this as we set out on our project together? We present this as 4 C's here: commitment, communication, cooperation, and coordination. And those are the foundation for our doing everything we can on our side to promote this team building experience. So, we're making a commitment. We agree to perform at a higher level with more sensitivity, with respect for one another, and you experience that yourself professionally in settings and realize what it means to you when you are treated with respect, and it certainly is the same on the job site. In my experience, I've learned a great deal from the construction professionals, the manufacturing representative professionals, the specifying professionals that I have come in contact with. And it certainly makes it different when we're treated with respect. Someone told me once that everyone has a story, and perhaps all you need to do is just learn the other party's story to find that you have things that are similar. There's also communication and doing it in advance of problems to avoid issues, but also to work out resolution to problems. Like Doug said, it's hard to be upset with somebody that you like. And of course, you want to use the contract documents as a basis for those communications, but certainly you want to make a commitment to great communication. And coordination, I apologize for that being on there twice, but it's only achieved by teamwork. And there are many opportunities throughout the construction process where that coordination can occur. We've touched on some of those in the past. One that comes to mind is an opportunity to review submittals and shop drawings in the field with not only the general contractor, but perhaps the owner and owner's representatives, maintenance personnel that are going to look after products and materials and equipment once they're in place, but also perhaps manufacturers' representatives, fabrication experts that will be in the supply chain, bringing those products to the site. So that coordination happens in the field, in the construction trailer, with the opportunity to go out and look at the project itself that's underway. It's that level of coordination that we're talking about that continues to promote the team. And then, of course, cooperation, making sure that the project is focused on common goals and that those goals are for the good of the project. Simple things like being professional and polite, being responsive, and showing respect. This morning, watched someone driving a car who absolutely was acting without respect for anyone, and watching the other cars around that one showing their distaste for that person. They have no idea why or what, but it's just the simplest of things to show respect, and it certainly has a huge implication. Following proper communication lines to be forthright and honest, but yet sensitive, and being sure that the proper people are communicated with. Nobody likes surprises. And then being documentative, if you'll allow me that word, in all of the things that you have communicated and all the commitments that you have made. Doug, are there any things to add?
I don't have anything to add here. I would ask Matthew, as we move to the next slide, if there's anything from the audience at this point.
There you go.
At this point, the audience seems kind of quiet. So, thankfully, no one's crying like the kid in the picture.
Yeah, there you go. So if we're trying to create this team and bring this whole puzzle together and maybe unweave some of that complicated web we started out with, then how is it that we do that? Well, Doug and I believe that you start with, and you can go to the next slide, Matthew, a qualified construction contract administrator. These are some of the qualifications that you'll find in the practice guide that would indicate someone who is the right person for the job. You know, they understand, first of all, the contract documents, and they know how to interpret them as they perform their duties out in the field or in the office. They understand the owner and designer contract as well as the owner and contractor agreements. They know when to use which agreement. They understand the roles and responsibilities of all of the parties that are participating in the contract. And they understand the administrative procedures that are outlined. I would fear to guess what percentage of litigation occurs on projects, but I would think it very high, simply because administrative procedures have not been done in accordance with the contract documents. They understand governing codes and regulations, where the project is and where it's being built, and under what code it was approved for construction. They know construction materials. They understand means and methods. Of course, they're not responsible for them, but they do understand them, and they do understand appropriate means and methods. They understand the relationship between the contractor and her subcontractors and suppliers and manufacturers, and how those relationships should and commonly do work. And they understand good communication skills, as we've talked about, and are open-minded, fair, which is a very important word in this list of qualifications, and that they are responsive. And Doug, I know you have some things to add about what makes a good contract administrator.
Well, to use another one-word description, I think honesty is one that needs to be at the top of the list. Honest in your dealings with the contractor, all the parties. The other thing I think is you need to be able to take criticism, and you have a thick skin. You're going to get darts thrown at you, and you have to be able to know how to deal with that.
Well, that's for sure. Absolutely right. So the first thing that this will be the first item that we review in this format that we are suggesting. And so this issue is titled Getting Out of Sequence. So on the next slide, you're now on, well, I guess, Matthew, wait a second. Are there any questions right now? Outstanding?
Still nothing. Pretty quiet today.
Okay. It's the holiday smooth. Everybody's getting in the mood for some time off. I hope everyone gets some to relax. So back to the scenario here. You're on a site visit, and you realize that the contractor has installed the foundation waterproofing, but you have not reviewed the submittal yet. In fact, though, you've had that submittal, and you've had it for maybe 60 days or more, and you haven't taken any action on it. It's there, but you haven't acted on it. So, what happens now? Well, let's take a look at some potential answers and go to the next slide. Do you get back to your office and check the submittal just as fast as you can, hoping that the product that's been installed complies with your documents? Or might you call a project team meeting to review the situation and come up with next steps? Would it be smart to issue a stop work order in the field and then issue a notice of correction of work or a notice of non-compliance in the field? There's work that's been installed that hasn't been properly reviewed and accepted. Might you notify the contractor in writing that the work installed will not be billable for payment until determined as compliant? Often we find ourselves making site observations when the pay application has been submitted for review, and perhaps on this trip you have the pay application in hand where the contractor has proudly presented his bill for the waterproofing. Do you perhaps talk to the superintendent immediately, perform a detailed review of what's being installed during the visit? Suggest to the contractor maybe that she voluntarily stop work until a proper review can be performed on the submittal. Or do you take no immediate action because the contractor is completely at her own risk because this work has not been reviewed and accepted, and it's not your fault?
Or, I'm sorry, Jim, or if anyone out there would like to volunteer another proposed solution, please feel free to do so. I believe Matthew has already informed us to how you can respond back in the chat box or by raising your hand.
Absolutely, and if you want to, Matthew, just we can either leave this slide up. The next one is just an image of a foundation wall that was installed and actually was right on schedule, and so the general contractor was able to get ahead of the project schedule as it called for waterproofing because they were able to sequence the work that way. So don't go any further forward, but let's go back. If you can, go backwards and put those solutions back up. And Matthew, what we'd like to do is give a chance, if anyone would so choose, raise their hand and give us comments about what they think solutions may be, either adding solutions or solutions that have been indicated here.
All right, Micah Barron raised your hand. Good on you for being the first volunteer. So I've unmuted your line, Micah, if you want to join the conversation.
Yes, sir. How's it going?
Good.
Initially I was thinking numbers 1, 2, and potentially 6. I mean, I was thinking I mean, obviously, you bear the brunt of the responsibility for returning the submittals in a timely manner, and of course, your project manual, your contract should say whether should indicate a time frame in which you should do that. And I mean, I would try to approach it and say, hey, you know, I messed up, I didn't get it back to you in time, and then of course definitely check and see if it's already compliant with your documents. If it's compliant with the documents, then you're okay. You shouldn't really have to do anything else except get your submittal approved and back to the contractor just for paperwork purposes. But I would be somewhat reluctant on number 6 to ask them to stop. I guess it would depend somewhat on the relationship there, but a suggestion, I guess the key word there is to suggest possibly, and then try to communicate about what his work schedule is, and if he can work on other stuff in the meantime until you can look at any possible alternatives if the waterproofing isn't the correct one. Those are pretty much just my thoughts on that.
And is it Michael? Is that right?
It's Micah.
Micah. Okay. Right. Gotcha. Doug, were you saying something?
No.
Well, I liked. Go ahead.
Micah, thanks for being bold enough to raise your hand and join us in this discussion. Go ahead, Jim.
Absolutely. I hope people will be comfortable with that. And Michael, you brought up some points that I had intended on making. One really important is that with this scenario as briefly described as it was, there are multiple what ifs or how about this in there, and you're absolutely right. We don't know did it match or not, and we don't know relationships and those sorts of things, and they will all have an impact on what the potential answers may be. While we want to kick the project off in this team approach, in this commitment to working at a higher level, perhaps we haven't. And so there are many holes in this that we don't have answers to that, as you said, may change how you approach it. Is there anyone else that, Matthew, that has raised their hand?
Joel didn't raise his hand, but he did leave a comment for us. Joel Nemi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, says, in the How to Avoid This Situation Ahead of Time department, include status of submittals as a regular weekly meeting item for the discussion. That often helps explain why review can be slow and also keeps architect focused on doing that work.
Absolutely. That's an absolutely wonderful standard item to review on your progress meeting agenda. And, often we are able to, for example, have submittal schedules within the documents that are bid. And if we don't, as a specifier, we often require the general contractor to submit those as some of the early administrative paperwork. And I have found it to be wonderfully successful if I can hold a meeting with the general contractor to talk about what that submittal schedule really ought to be like. Because, and that's part of the reason that we use this example, foundation waterproofing is one of those that come pretty early in the schedule. Concrete mix, soil, if there's a borrow site, any kind of structural steel, rebar, things that perhaps require fabricators to have drawn before they can be prepared. There are items that are critical to the project schedule to receive early. And some of those can be pretty onerous packages to go through. What often happens is that we are sent whatever it is that the contractor has received from a subcontractor. This may be, as we've talked about before, trying to work with respect. This may be because there are some potential discounts that might be obtained if orders are placed early, and subcontractor agreements require those orders to be placed with certain documents submitted, and so those submittals or shop drawings might be a part of that agreement. Of course, we can say that's not our problem, that's yours. But if we take the approach that, well, let's find a way to work through this, and I go back to my meeting, if I have the opportunity to go through a submittal schedule, and we can agree that there are things that need to be looked at right away, and those will come, and I will commit the time to get them done. And then there are things that aren't necessarily needed right away, and they will come much later when I have more opportunity to get them reviewed, or that they be submitted and I can hold them until a certain date that I've committed to meeting, and that is acceptable to the contractor. Now, there's a lot of contract language in there, I understand, but paint and ceiling tile might not need to come to you at the pre-construction conference. And so when you talk about a review schedule, if you're able to set that up and agree on that, and then monitor that as you described through your progress meetings, then you have a great opportunity at being successful. Doug, you have any items to add to that?
No, Matthew, click forward 2 slides, and we'll talk about some of these possible solutions.
Sure. We did have one more series of comments came in here from Larry Whitlock, as I guess an addendum to the 7 on the screen yet. He said he would return to the job trailer, review the A201 and the general requirements with regards to submittals, and then ask to see the quote approved end quote submittal documents in the GC's files. Then after discussing the situation with the GC, I would return to the office to review the submittal properly.
Well, that's a great point. What in this case, as our example, the following occurred, and I think Larry made a great point there to go back to the general conditions and the requirements that say you're not supposed to be working out there without an approved or reviewed submittal on the job site. So in this case, what happened, the team meeting was called as quickly as possible to talk about the situation. And then I'll skip down to actually number 5. Number 6. At the time of that meeting, there was a detailed review performed of the installation. You're on the site, the particular people are there that need to be involved with the review. You're unaware if it meets if it is your specified product. So this is a great opportunity to go through a very detailed review of what's in place, what the materials are, what have been installed, are they a systematic relationship, that they are the right materials within the system that you specified, and or are they a system of parts that have come from other manufacturers perhaps. But you have a chance now to do your field analysis there with the team and come up with what the next steps are going to be. We we've agreed to act with respect and be responsive, then perhaps we do get back to the office and check that submittal. But that's not the first thing that we do. And Doug, I'm talking too much. I apologize. Let me hush and let you talk some.
No, the one thing that's troubling to me about the scenario that's presented here is when you go back and read the facts as they were given, the submittal was sitting on the architect's desk for 60 days and he hadn't looked at it yet. I would propose that for a waterproofing submittal, 60 days is way too long for it to be sitting on your desk. For any submittal, it's too long for it to be sitting on your desk and you not have looked at it yet. So that's one issue. Now, we're not clear on the facts as to why it sat there for so long. It could be because one of the slides noted that the waterproofing was being installed a little bit ahead of schedule. It could be that the architect hadn't looked at it yet because of the submittal schedule, that it wasn't due yet. So all those issues need to come into play when you're actually figuring out what your solution to the issue is. Is it my fault as the architect if I didn't review it in a timely manner? Is it an issue that the contractor's ahead of himself and he's doing the work prior to his schedule that he submitted so he could get ahead of the jobs? All of that needs to be taken into consideration. On this slide, we're talking, when you look at item number 4, issuing a notice of correction or a notice of non-compliance, I think we need to distinguish here, and Jim, I might be getting ahead of myself, we need to distinguish the difference between work that is in non-compliance and work that is defective. You're out there, the waterproofing's going up, you see it, you don't know whether or not the waterproofing is the correct product. Now, it could be the correct product, just as you specified, and not be an issue. The only issue is that he's installing it before he got the approved submittal back. So that is non-compliance with the contract requirements, but it's not defective. So that's just a distinction I wanted to point out. It would be defective if it was the wrong product. Matthew, do we have anything else from our participants?
At the moment, we are quiet again.
Jim, are you good to go to the next slide?
Yes, I think I was talking on mute. I'm sorry. So this begins to inform some of what Doug was saying is, is this non-conforming work that it doesn't meet the contract documents, and so thus might require a notice of non-compliance, or is it just possibly work that needs to be corrected? And of course we don't know because we haven't done the review of the document yet, but it could be either or. There may be some installation that's not correct. Of course, it may be, it could very well be the correct product. It just may not have been installed properly, or there may be some defect in the product itself. We don't know. So whether it's a corrective work notice or a notice of non-compliance, there's research to do to establish that. But as has been brought up here by participants and by Doug, the reason that we need to document this is, first of all, it's required in the general conditions, and we may have all had that experience where we wish we had documented something when the issue came to light, but attempting to be that team player and take the higher road, we did not do so, and so we have maybe gotten ourselves in a conundrum with time going by that shouldn't have. So even though it may seem a harsh way to deal with the issue. It is a professional way to deal with the issue, and might be advantageous for us to do that. Any other things to add into that, Doug, that you see there?
Well, it's the slide notes. It's the slide notes is not only in the general conditions, it's also in your contract with the owner. It's a contract requirement for you to inform the owner of any non-complying work. So if you fail to do so, you are in breach of your contract. I know I've been on the job site doing a site visit and come across something that might be minor or easily fixed, and point it out to the superintendent, and he'll say, oh, you don't need to write that up, I'm going to take care of that. And he has the guy go over and he starts working on it. I still have to note it, and I'll note, I inform the contractor partake or started corrective actions immediately. So it's fulfilling my contract requirements of informing the owner, it's documenting the situation, and it's also letting everyone know that I've got a responsible contractor, he got on it right away.
That's right. So I think, Michael, you're right on target with particularly the important items there. And if we go to the next slide, one of the things that we put these in there for is this. There is an important distinction between what you do as a field observation and what you do to document an issue. And I know, Doug, maybe this would be one for you to talk more about than me, but we put these in there as examples of those forms.
The field observation report is just that. It's a report to document the observations that you see at the time that you're out there on the site. Those things typically or should come often and could be overlooked in terms of items of importance, since the contractor and the owner are getting them every week or more often than that, or sometimes less often than that. As they come through, especially the owner, may look at it and, not give it the attention that it needs. And when there's work that is non-conforming or work that is defective, you need to let everyone know in a manner that they take attention to it. So while you can note those items on your field report, it's strongly encouraged that you follow up with a official non-conforming work notice or deficient work notice, so that it is clear to everyone that there's an issue out there that needs to be addressed. So you don't use a field observation report for a punch list. You don't use a field observation report for a non-conforming work notice. You use the documents as they are intended, so that it's a part of that communication, so that everybody is clear on what the issues are.
So, yes, Matthew, let's go to the next slide, and we'll touch on perhaps what some of the mistakes were here in this scenario, in this example. For sure, certainly, the submittal process management is being poorly accomplished. As Doug said, it's just egregious to have a foundation or waterproofing submittal for 60 days without having taken action on it. There may be extenuating circumstances for that, and we don't know. There are so many items to touch on when you talk about submittals. Were they received properly in your office? And if not, then were they processed back to the contractor quickly so that they could correct that? So there may be other extenuating circumstances, but there just really is no good answer for why something would be in your hands for 60 days with no action. perhaps there's a lack of project schedule and submittal coordination here, where things are coming in too early or coming in too late. Certainly that submittal is not one of them, but I have been in trailers where the submittals were brought in 2 boxes, and they may perhaps be 20% of the submittals that are going to come in on the project, and they were brought to the pre-construction conference. So someone was doing a good job of gathering information. If they have done their job in reviewing it before it's brought to you, well, gosh, that could be a good thing. But there obviously needs to be some coordination about a submittal process that dumps large loads at one time. Also, there's an issue with communication here. If things were moving at such a pace that waterproofing was able to start, you know, it may be that perhaps you're not going to the job frequently enough. Perhaps that's because of a contract issue with the owner that you're working for. Maybe those services aren't indicated there, but certainly a communication process should be occurring with something as critically important as waterproofing underground. Maybe there should have been a pre-installation conference. Maybe there should have been a mock-up. So those things could possibly be included in the project general conditions or supplementary general conditions. So a lot of things that we don't know details of there, but managing communication during construction in a better fashion may have avoided this problem altogether. And, you know, we talk about the what-ifs frequently. To go back to number 1, the exposure that now the project incurs because of a lack of timely responses is greatly enhanced. And we all know that it's in the end that things can get very messy when timeliness is at the center of an issue that's been brought forward. So certainly there seems to be a lack of understanding or perhaps concern on the part of the designer here because those submittals were being held for such a long period of time. I don't know if there are any others that anyone would like to offer, or Doug, other mistakes that might be pointed out.
One comment. I'm sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to say there was a comment that just popped in here from Chuck Coleman. He said that he thinks the extenuating circumstances would inform the action to be taken in response to the circumstances on the field. It strikes me as unreasonable to delay the installation of the waterproofing until the submittal is returned to the contractor. That sounds like a lead-in to a delay claim.
Quite possible. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, that is quite possible. But then you also have the issue of if the waterproofing is the wrong product. What if it's you really wanted a sheet waterproofing and he's putting on a fluid applied damp proofing material? Then you've got the issue of if something that's not done immediately and he's continuing on with the work, that you've got the issue of all of the work that's being done and the change order that's going to come saying, well, you knew what I was doing. You were out there on this day. It's in your field report, and you said nothing about it. So all those issues need to be taken into consideration. There was a point that Micah raised about reviewing the submittal and having in your contract a set number of days to review the submittal. The AIA contract documents don't specify a set number of days, and I don't have the language in front of me, but it's basically states that the submittal should be submitted to the architect in time enough for the architect to do a thorough review, but the architect to be able to, the architect needs to review it as promptly as possible so as not to delay the work. So there's not a specific time set. I have seen several contracts where there is a set time. I would caution you that if you're going to agree to a set number of days in your contract for reviewing submittals or for responding to RFIs, I've also seen that, is that you make sure you comply with what's in that contract. If it says 21 days, you need to do it within 21 days and not 22 or 23 days, because that's going to set you up for being liable for a delay claim that the contractors have, for him saying, well, I didn't get the submittal back in time. So be careful about turnaround times, especially when you're doing larger projects and you know you're going to get huge submittals. I know precast, structural steel, submittals like that that are going to involve other consultants. Typically it will take longer to do, so just be cautious of committing to a certain number of days. And if you do, make sure you stick to that day.
That's right. And so, Matthew, in the next slide, in summary for this one case study, you want to be sure to manage the project schedule and your time together as well as the contractors, and be working offensively and not defensively. And that certainly would set this scenario in a better light, particularly in relationship to the schedule. So the next slide, Matthew, is our next date. We took time to set a foundation for this one, so that we used one example of a case study. Parts 2, 3, and 4 are case studies where we will go through very much the same scenario, where we'll present a problem. We'll try to describe that. Of course, there'll be some extenuating circumstances. We can't go into complete detail, but as much as we can. And then we'll provide some scenarios as possible solutions. We'll go over what the solutions were on this particular example, and we'll talk about a few of the things that inform that, how that decision was made. So I don't know if there are any right at this time who have suggestions. I'd be glad to jot them down, or if you would be so kind to send them to Matthew or Doug or myself, and we'll certainly get them worked into the presentation. Maybe the good news and the sad news all at the same time is we don't lack for material upon which to base these conversations.
Matthew, if you can switch to the next slide. Jim's email and my email address are there, so you can send them directly to us, so you can get them to Matthew. And we would certainly welcome any suggestions that you have.
We did actually have two comments and or questions that actually tie into each other here. So Chuck asked, if not installing the specified waterproofing, did the contractor need to submit a substitution request? And then Larry happened to make a comment at about the exact same time, saying, in this example would probably require the owner to decide to accept the installation if being performed correctly rather than requiring installed membrane to be removed. So I guess any comments you'd like to do with that as we wrap up the rest of the questions from today?
If the contractor is installing a product that's not one of the ones that was specified, he should have submitted a substitution request. That is correct. The submittal process is not to be used. I know I don't allow substitutions to be submitted through the submittal process. If I get a submittal in and it's not the right product and he's got a note or something on there saying, can I use this instead or whatever, I'll reject it as a submittal, send it back and tell them you need to send me a substitution request. It's just like the same conversation or similar conversation we had about the field reports not serving as a notice of noncompliance. The documentation needs to be correct. Sometimes it gets to be cumbersome, and you can probably save some time by doing it on one sheet of paper instead of two. But once you get into a situation and you have to unravel all the details, it's a whole lot better. You'll be in a whole lot better position, especially when you're trying to explain it to a jury that doesn't know anything about construction, to have it laid out in a manner to where they can clearly understand it by having the documents serve their each individual purpose is the best way I know how to do that. Jim, anything to add?
No, Doug, I think you got it.
Great. Well, that wraps
I
up
sure
all.
don't.
Yeah, that wraps up all the questions and comments we have here. So again, as Jim and Douglas mentioned, their emails are on the screen there, as well as you should have mine through all the meeting notifications that were sent to you. Feel free to submit any additional experiences or stories you'd like to add in the future sessions. And if nothing else, happy holidays to you all, and we look forward to seeing you in January for part 2 of this session. Thank you again, and have a great day.